So I hope you enjoyed this little demonstration. This forest needs to do quite a bit of growing in the future. As you can see, I've leveled off some of the tops, cut the trunks in half. Today I planted a forest, not one that stretches for miles, but one that fits in a shallow pot. A forest of Shin Deshojo, a Japanese maple whose name can mean new. What we do to forests is a reflection of what we do to ourselves and to each other. Gandhi's words resonate more deeply as the years pass. Hey bonsai friends, it's been a minute since our last bonsai video. So today I'm planning on showing you how to make a maple bonsai forest. Something like this one here. This is actually trident maples, but today I'll be working with a Japanese maple, a cultivar called Shin Deshojo, which means new red. And it's actually a maple that in spring has very bright red leaves, like this one here, and it'll keep these leaves for about this bright red color for about 3 weeks to a month before they turn green, and then it'll be green for the rest of the summer. In the fall it's not quite so bright. It's sort of a maroonish color of red, but it's a wonderful cultivar to work with. This tree here has an interesting history. I always wanted a Shin Deshojo, a Japanese maple, with a very interesting, a curvy trunk, and could never find one, so I decided to grow one on my own. But I wanted a very thick nabari, or a root base. So what I did was I bought a clump of maples from a friend. There were 4 trees growing out of the base, and cut all the 4 on the outside periphery, cut them off, left one in the middle, and then I threaded through a very, very thin cutting of Shin Deshojo maple through the central trunk right here. I grafted it. I did a thread graft and let it grow out. Removed the original tree about almost 2 years after I did the thread graft, and then started wiring the trunk into an interesting shape. Some of these branches have actually been grafted along the trunk, and there will be some more removed, the 2 lower ones here and maybe a few at the top. But it's still a work in progress, and that's how I like it to be. What I'd like to do is start by describing how to create a maple forest. If we look at this forest here, we see that first of all there's a main tree. The main trunk is thicker than the other trunks and taller. And then we have secondary trunks. We have this one here, this one here. They create a rough triangle. In fact, this secondary trunk, I grafted it to the base of the main tree. And then you create mini triangles around each main tree. So here on our 3rd main tree, we have a mini triangle here. We have mini triangle here, and then I've added 2 here and 2 here, and another one to draw your eye to the back of the forest. So it requires a diversity of trunks, different trunk thicknesses, trunk heights, and trees of different ages preferably, to create a natural looking forest. Try to avoid any regular spacing between trunks. Some of the trunks should be very close to each other, almost, you could almost say glued together, and some should be further away. And don't try to fill the whole pot with trunks. Leave a good empty space, which creates a natural looking landscape feel to it. Here we have a Japanese hornbeam forest. It's a straight trunk style. It was actually redone a few years ago. I removed some of the trunks that had thickened up too much and added 3 smaller trunks, 1 in the foreground and 2 in the background. So you can see again the trunk spacing. The main tree is here, secondary tree here, and tertiary tree or third tree is here, forming a rough triangle. And then around each main tree I've added smaller trees to create more mini triangles. So this one here, we've got 1, 2, 3. We've got 1, 2 here. We've got a secondary tree here, or a smaller tree for the background. So you can see how you compose forests by having main trees grouped together, but not equally spaced. The triangle always has to be a scaling triangle. So you see 1, 2, 3. They're not equally spaced. This one here is further away than the other 2. Also, Japanese hornbeams are great trees as bonsai material, because in the spring they have these little flowering sort of racemes here, and they turn into these wonderful little catkins. They look a little bit like upside down bulrushes hanging from the branches, and they're very ornamental. They'll stay on there all summer long and right through the autumn. They turn a beautiful yellowish color during the summer. One last example. This here is a hackberry forest. It's actually Japanese hackberry, and I put them together about 30 years ago to give you an idea of the time scale. Here we see the trunk arrangement. It's very interesting. I grouped them very closely together. Main tree in the front, secondary trunk here, tertiary trunk in the back, and all around are smaller trees to give depth to our forest planting. It is not pruned. I just didn't have time to prune it this winter, so I really do have to take it down again. It should have been done probably a few months ago, but it'll just bud back. So I will prune it now that I've just brought it outside. I will prune it, and it'll be even prettier. When you're creating deciduous tree forests, you always have to think about scale, proportions, and depth. So the scale is you need some taller trees to create height. You need smaller trees to fill it out to create width. Proportions, you need thicker trunks, and usually the thicker trunks are the tallest, and they gradually get thinner. And then depth of field is very important to give you the impression that the forest is gradually shrinking away in the distance. So here you can see that the smaller trees are placed in the back to create a vanishing point. And that is very, very important when you are creating a forest bonsai. The question is there a difference between creating deciduous forests and coniferous forests? Speaking of coniferous forests, here we have a larch forest. It's got actually 5 trees in the forest, and you can see the grouping. The trees are the trunks are very vertical. The branches descend downwards, and they're very straight. So it creates a very formal looking forest as compared to deciduous forests. Before we get on to the main subject, which is deciduous forests, I just wanted to take a minute to show you this Scots pine that I speed pruned last fall. I did several different varieties of trees last fall, and finally got around to repotting this 2 weeks ago. It's still not wired, it's still not shaped, but in the coming weeks I'll be repotting many of the trees that I speed pruned. Look at the last video, you'll see it, and in the future you'll see many other videos of me repotting some of those trees. So today's bonsai topic is making a forest with a deciduous forest with some Shin Deshojo Japanese maples. Okay, Acer palmatum, Shin Deshojo. As I mentioned earlier, Shin means new, and Deshojo means new red. So new red, because they form bright red foliage in the spring. I've chosen a few younger specimens of rooted Shin Deshojo cuttings. The two bigger pots here will be main trees. We have a medium or two medium-sized ones and two smaller ones. I potted up one of these as an individual tree in a smaller pot, but I need an odd number of trees, so I might use it in our forest. And here we have a small air layering that was done from a Shin Deshojo forest. So we'll use one of these two, okay, to make our forest also. When you're creating forest bonsai, we actually want more vertical style trees. We don't want lower branches, because obviously in forests the lower branches will be shaded out. So we will remove many of the lower branches here. I've removed some of the upper ones also, and we're wiring the trunks. It's really important to have good trunk movement. The branches, well, even if we don't have good branching, they'll pop out over the spring and summer, and I'll keep the ones I want and wire them down either this fall or next spring. Usually I try to do it in the summer, because if not, they harden off and sometimes become too difficult to wire slightly downwards. So we'll wire this one. Now we'll wire some of the medium-sized trunks here. Now I don't know what height I need. I don't need all of this, so I will cut it down slightly lower. And this is too straight, so I will try to give a bit of movement to the upper portion. I don't need to wire the whole trunk, because the trunk already has an interesting little shape. It was wired a year previous to this. There's no point in rewiring it. We just want to do the upper part that was too straight and maybe lower and give a nice curve to this branch. All right, so this one is ready. In the case of this one, I don't think I'll be using this, but this is a pretty sharp bend, so I might have to use it. So I am going to put some wire between some of this and this one here. So we're going to finish up with our smaller trees. These ones are going to be in the background of our forest. They're going to give depth to our forest. So we do have to have wire the branches and have them growing outwards. So that's what I'm about to do. Now I'm leaving many of these branches much too long, because I don't know how much I'm going to need until I put them together in the forest. Once they go next to the other trees, then I'll be able to figure out exactly how short that I should cut them. And we've got one last smaller tree to do. Finally, last but not least, we have a very tiny Shin Deshojo maple, which is going to make an excellent background tree. Probably it'll be the vanishing point tree right at the back of the forest, which leads the eye on a path right through the forest to the background. You don't want to make them too curvy when you're making a forest, because if you do make them too curvy, then it's too difficult to match them up with the other trees. I'm just trying to give them a little bit of movement to make them look a little bit more gracious. We've got all our trees wired now. Now's the time to start composing our forest. So next step is getting out the pot. I've already prepared it. I've covered the drainage holes, put in the anchoring wire. So the next step will be literally setting the trees in the forest pot. So this is where we begin by choosing our main tree. We have a choice of two, but they're both about the same trunk thickness, but this trunk has more character than the other one, so this will be our main tree in our forest. Now, the forest is running, or this tree, the direction goes from right to left, so my whole forest will be directional. It'll be right to left. Now you can see that we've chosen a very shallow forest pot. The pot is actually very interesting. It's a Yamaki pot from Tokoname. Yamaki is very, very high quality, handmade. It's signed at the bottom. You can see the signature. It's got the Yamaki stamp. And I chose an ivory colored pot. Usually for red-leafed maples, I would choose a sort of a darker blue pot or a greenish pot to contrast with the color of the spring leaves. In this case, I didn't have one the right size. They were either too big or small. And as you know, the Yamaki kilns stopped making pots. They closed up about 10 or 15 years ago. So I just managed to get a certain number of pots. I can't get any more. So I'm lucky to have this one. The ivory colored pots go extremely well with the winter color of the bark. There's sort of maples have a silvery, whitish silvery bark in winter. So it will be very appropriate to show this forest in winter in this color of pot. I like coarse bonsai soil. It helps the trees grow well. I know it takes a lot of room in this shallow pot, but I'm going to be building up the soil level above the rim of the pot. And in fact, I even brought a very interesting stone, which I found in Arizona in the desert, but it looks very old and very rugged, and in this forest planting, I think it's going to be very appropriate. My main tree is off center. I like to bring them a little bit toward the front. Gives me more room to fill in the back. Now, we're going to construct our main triangle. This is my number 1 tree. Okay, my number 2 tree is going to be right here. Again, we go through the same process of removing some of the soil around the root base so that we can see the roots. This one actually has quite good rootage. Mind you, for forests, you don't need excellent root systems. A forest is an excellent way to use trees with defective rooting, because sometimes you even have to cut away some of the roots to get them closer to each other. So don't worry if your trees don't have good rootage. It won't show in a forest. And I'm going to match the trunk movement. Now I want to get it closer to my main tree, so I'm actually removing some of the soil so I can bring it in very, very closely. Sometimes you have to even tie them together to a certain extent so that they won't move away from each other. So here I'm going to actually temporarily tie them together. I've wired it, but the wire is not thick enough to make the trunk. No, I want even thicker still to bend it the way I want it bent. So I'm going to add a second wire here. I guess I could have taken it off and replaced it by just one thicker wire, but that would take a little bit more time. So I'm just doing it this way. Okay, so now we'll go to our third trunk. The work continues. Now we're going to our fourth trunk. Now I do have a rock that I want to add in. I will be putting it in before it's too late. Probably in the foreground here. The rock is actually I want it to appear in the foreground, and so I've actually just set it in the coarse akadama and pumice mixture in the bottom layer. I'll be adding soil around the roots. It is terribly important that you can see each trunk from the front of your forest. So that's what I'm doing right now, is I'm trying to set them so that each trunk is visible from the front, that no trunk hides the other one. We have our basic triangle here, these trees here. Now we are we're composing our secondary triangles. This is, we've got our 1, 2, 3 trees. Now we will be composing secondary triangles. Now we're on to our last little tree here that we'll be putting in the background to create depth in our forest. It's quite tall. We don't need a tree this tall, so we'll actually reduce the height. We don't want to cut too many roots because the roots are quite limited. As I said, often what we want is a vanishing point. So the vanishing point should pull the eye through to the end. Well, I like it here more, so we'll be putting it right here. Now comes the job of stabilizing all of these trees. We have to really make sure that they don't move in the pot. Before I do that, I'm just going to try to arrange the different heights. This is my main tree, so it has to be the tallest. This one here is much too tall, so we're going to cut off part of it. Toward the front, it's higher. As we go toward the back, it's getting lower and lower and lower to create that idea of a forest getting smaller in the distance. Now I will start tying all of these trees in. to make sure that they don't move. If they do move, the danger is that that the roots will tear. So trying to figure out which wire goes with which is always a problem, but let's try using what I think is the right wire. Now we've got the trees all firmly anchored. They're unequally spaced. Trying to get the lines flowing in the right directions was very difficult. The more curves you have in your trunks, the harder it is to give the impression that the trunks aren't crossing. Now I've tried to arrange it in a very nice harmonious manner. Now we're adding the finer soil mix, and we'll work it in among the roots. You'll see that I'm working the soil in with a chopstick very, very gently among the roots. Now, what inspired this maple forest? As you can see, first of all, the trunks are very squiggly, and often when I travel the Trans-Canada Highway between Montreal and Toronto, there's a section along the highway near Kingston where there's a little forest, and all the trunks are curvy like this, and it is a maple forest. And I've always said, well, I want to create a maple forest just like that. So this is it, folks. Now, why did I add a rock well, I guess you could call it a boulder in the ground, because here in Canada, we have very rocky soil. Our land was scoured by glaciers. They've worn down a lot of rocks, and it is rocks like this that makes trees' roots curve, and that's reflected in all the twists and turns in the trunk. Trees growing in very in soil without any rocks, usually the trunks will grow straight. It's when they're growing in very, very rocky soil and the roots are like serpentine among the rocks. Again, that's reflected in the upper part of your tree. I added the rock to give this forest a certain veracity, to show why these trees have these curvy trunks. I think that's really, really, really important. And also, as I say, it's a reminder of where I live in Canada. We have rocky fields, rocky coastlines, a lot of rocks here in Canada. So I think our forest should reflect that. I think we're about ready to water it now. Usually I do not repot outside. Usually I repot in my studio because the roots can dry out very quickly in the sun and wind. Today I've sprayed the roots quite often. We're lucky because it was a very cloudy day. I wouldn't have done this potting outside on a very, very hot sunny day. Now we're going to compact the soil, not too hard. This is, there's no soil in this mixture. It's actually 70% akadama, which aka means red, dama means clay. It's an artificial soil medium, a volcanic soil from Japan. And the other 30% is actually pumice. Again, this is a Japanese pumice, but you can find pumice pretty well anywhere in the world. Sometimes I use pumice from Montpellier in France, Montpellier. And I get my potting medium wherever I can find it. Fortunately, here in Montreal, we do have an importer who imports it for us. so it makes it easy to find our potting mediums. Here we have Selaginella, which are not truly ferns, but they're closely related to ferns. And here we have some miniature plants which are closely related to irises. This is Acorus gramineus pusillus. This is a very nice variety with very short, thin pieces of like grass-like texture. So we want to give our forest a natural look. So we'll add some at the base of our trees to give it that natural look. We'll add a few ferns to give a natural appearance also, or Selaginellas, I should say. Sometimes I even use them for hiding the fact that a tree is lacking roots in one area. In this case, no. I just want to make it look more lush. So now we're going to be mossing it up a bit. The moss will help to give it a more natural appearance, keep the humidity. Maples need to cool roots, so it keeps the roots cool, and also will keep the soil in place and give contours, so aesthetically it will be very pleasing. Again, I'm trying to remove a lot of the old bonsai soil from beneath the moss so it will better stick to the ground. And I do wet it so that, again, it'll ensure adhesion. So folks, this concludes today's video on how to make a deciduous bonsai forest. As you can see, we've topped it all off with a nice covering of moss. I did it pretty quickly, but still you can see the basic principle. I've used many different species of moss, different colors, different textures to give our forest a nice natural appearance. This forest needs to do quite a bit of growing in the future. As you can see, I've leveled off some of the tops, cut the trunks in half, so they will bud out all along the trunks. I'll be selecting branches along the main trunks and wiring them arcing slightly downwards to create a nice, gracious, charming appearance to this forest. Overall, it should have a nice sort of rounded silhouette that makes it appear as if it's a lush forest, something you would see in a very humid, sunny location. And I think the green moss and the little grasses and ferns add to that overall look of lushness and density that I was trying to achieve. So I hope you enjoyed this little demonstration. If you did, please subscribe so that you can continue viewing these little videos in the future. Thank you very much.